fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 252 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. As always, Adnan, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing well, and because I have a platform to myself that I will selfishly use right now, I would like to tell everyone to never fly Frontier.
There you go.
That is all that I will say right now.
Yes, so we have, advertisers. Hit us up if you want a positive review. We also have the shit list segment, which Frontier is now, unfortunately, a part of. So, Frontier, if they want to advertise, then we'll take it all back. But, please, until then, Frontier officially on the Falcoholic Live shit list. So, not on the shit list, however, is Dave Choate, the Falcoholic himself. Dave, welcome. How are you doing this evening? I mean, not yet. We'll see. We'll see how
for everything. Yeah.
There's 60 minutes left of this program, so we could change things by then. But Dave, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Happy to be back. It's been a little bit.
Yes, well, Dave has, been dealing with the tortures of the damned, mostly the Falcons, of course, but that's just part of the job description, unfortunately. But happy.
Dave for the last 2 months has been telling us, "Oh no, guys, I'll be on the show next week. Oh, next week for sure. Next week.
Don't worry.
I just went out for a pack of cigarettes. I was coming right back.
Yep, exactly. And you can hear him, guys, in the background. We have with us a very special guest for the first time, Joe Patrick at JAPatrick200 on the Twitters. He is also on 92.9 as the Atlanta Falcons reporter, also manages the Atlanta United site over SB Nation, Dirty South Soccer. Joe, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great. This feels surreal. I've listened to the podcast so many times. I've tuned in for the live show so many times. So it's like meeting your heroes here. Well, we already met at
yeah, we
did.
Yeah.
But now we're doing it. So it's fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to, like Joe said, we got to meet in person, talk a lot about the team. So I know we had been like Twitter sort of back and forthers before, but when you put a face to the name and you get to meet a little bit, that really seals the deal. And you were very complimentary of us at training camp, so that definitely gets you a podcast appearance. So contractually, my obligation has now been fulfilled. But Joe, welcome, and guys, we're gonna dive into the first preseason game, which did not suck for a change. So the Falcons actually win this game, 19-3. Wasn't quite as dominant, especially in the first half, as the score might suggest, but some good plays, lots of nice stuff that we saw. Unfortunately, some injuries as well that we'll have to talk about, but we will get into all that. And before we do, want to bring you a quick word from our sponsor real quick, betonline.ag, your number one source for all your sports betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Maybe you're feeling overly confident in the Falcons, want to bet on them to win the NFC South. Maybe you think D. Alford's going to come. I don't know what the over-under is on D. Alford punt return touchdowns, but I would think it's probably one. So if you think he can replicate what he did in this preseason game, then probably some money to be made there. Probably not a lot, but something. But no matter what you want to bet on, guys, BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season. They've got you covered for all your insider sports wagering needs. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. We got a full house here. A lot of us, obviously, all of us watched the preseason game. It was an interesting game. But Joe, as our guest of honor, I'll let you open the discussion. What was sort of your biggest takeaway or the thing you want to touch on first from this preseason game, which was actually somewhat entertaining for a change? So I'm definitely happy about that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's obviously tough to take too much away from it when there was one starter who played the entire game. That was Parker Hesse. Yep. I asked Arthur Smith about him today, by the way, because he was like the only one. He played the entire game. He played the second most snaps to Logan Woodside, and he basically said it was just because they needed a tight end out there. John Fitzpatrick had a thing, so he couldn't play. So, but anyway, you weren't seeing the starters, but I thought you saw, especially defensively, just an identity, and the identity that we've been hearing a lot about from Ryan Nielsen, from Arthur Smith, and what we thought it would be with the players that they've signed. And obviously we didn't see some of those, the big names that they signed in free agency, but it was just so good to see, again, that identity. And it's so different from, especially last year, where they were so kind of bend but don't break, playing off receivers a lot. And in this game, they were aggressive, just up in the Dolphins' faces, and it burned them at times. It's not like they were perfect. They gave up some big plays, but obviously they stiffened up in the red zone. And I just thought that was kind of the overarching takeaway, was just seeing it in person was so gratifying, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it's really nice to see. Obviously, you love to see the depth. And Parker Hesse, I just assumed that he was so integral to everything the team does. They just could not have Parker Hesse.
Yeah.
It all falls apart without Parker Hesse. We know this. So, yeah, no, very good points there. Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't he spring the key block on that Godwin Igwebuike touchdown?
Yeah.
That was the play that opened him up.
Yeah. So, I mean, love to see that, of course, and got it. I was definitely not upset to see at least one starter in action this week, but we'll go next to Dave Choate. Dave, what would you like to touch on and get us started on this game? I know Joe brought up some good points if you want to continue on some of those, but interested in your thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, I think I'll throw a curveball, and I'll start with Logan Woodside. How many times over the years have we seen the Falcons' third quarterback go out there and just aggressively make us wish we weren't watching that football game? No offense to anybody from the past, but seeing that level of confidence from a guy that, you hope you don't have to count on, but maybe you do, was really nice, I thought. And I thought, I've been thinking since they signed him, Logan Woodside, really, but that was kind of confirmation that it's a little bit better than I thought he was. And as an emergency option, if they're going to keep him, which I think they're probably likely to, it's nice to see that. So I thought that was great. I thought pretty much everything I saw from both sides of the ball was good to excellent. The one thing that I guess I want to see more of this coming game is just separation at receiver, both literally and figuratively. Zay Malone, I thought, played well. But Frank Darby, unfortunately, now out of the picture. And I didn't think we got enough of a look at everybody else to say, this guy's clearly out in front for that fifth receiver job. I assume personally they're only carrying 5. So otherwise, it was just nice to watch an entertaining, competent game that they broke wide open at the end. I think, Breon Borders is going to be an interesting player because you have that 2-week suspension at the beginning of the year. And then what do you do with him? He's done nothing but make plays. And, maybe he's just a preseason hero, but I feel like he's probably more than that. And they have it already a bit crowded at corner, if Mike Hughes isn't going to be out for, a lengthier amount of time. So just question marks that came up for me, some things that I liked. But overall, any preseason game, I'm always saying, don't read too much into this. I read a little too much into the defense. I'm going to do it again if they do it against the Bengals. Seeing that from the backups is awesome.
Oh, yeah. It's been so long. I mean, it's been so long since we've seen the second string defense not look like a complete disaster. I mean, most of the time, even the first string defense looks like a complete disaster. So that was, they got some pressure. We got some picks. We got some sacks. I mean, it was nice to see, certainly. Not going to complain about any of that. And I agree with you about Woodside, too. It's nice to have. It's been a nice change there as well, right? Watching a third string quarterback, which typically in the preseason would be the Falcons go to their third string quarterback and it's all right, we could probably turn this off because they're not going to move the ball. And Woodside didn't have a spectacular game by any means. I mean, he had to play behind, varying degrees of offensive line quality, and you could see in the second half that really nosedived, but kept the offense on schedule. I think he was generally accurate and I think got the ball where it needed to be. And the offense as a whole was watchable in the preseason, which is, again, never a given. So happy to see that too. Toledo legend, Logan Woodside. That's definitely a topic for later in the show too, in terms of roster implications, because I think Woodside, is a guy that you certainly think is going to make them consider keeping a third quarterback on the roster, particularly with the new third quarterback rule. Which basically lets him be a free active on game day as an emergency quarterback. So we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. All right, last but certainly not least, to get us started, Adnan, what do you want to dive into here right off the top?
Well, these guys mentioned it. It was just nice to see a relatively dominant performance. And I know people are going to come out and be like, oh, well, it was the second and third stringers, but, how many years have we watched the second and third stringers just get their brains beaten in these preseason games? It's nice that they played so well because this is your depth. these guys, just because they were playing in this preseason game, just because they're not technically the starters, it doesn't mean that, oh yeah, like they're never going to see playing time. It's the NFL. It's the most brutal sport, in existence. Well, one of the most brutal sports in existence. There's going to be injuries. These guys are, going to represent your depth. And this is, watching the game, I just sort of had this thought that, yeah, this is the deepest this team has been in how many years? I mean, at the very least since 2018, at the very least, if not even earlier. And I mean, those cuts are going to be absolutely brutal to make. There's going to be some really good players that will not have a place on this team. Whereas, even last year, there were some players that were on the roster that should not have, had a place on any NFL roster. So this is a really nice change of pace. I like that we saw some separation in that punt return battle. I think the coaches have been waiting for that. We saw the D. Alford punt return touchdown. I really like what we saw from Godwin Igwebuike in the run game. He's someone to really watch out for in that wide receiver 4 battle. I really like, I want to give a shout out to a couple more guys. DeMarco Helms, who, he had the interception and he led the team in tackles and he was just everywhere in stopping the run. And then another name that people aren't really talking about as much, and I get it because he plays that very unsexy interior defensive line position, Albert Huggins. Albert Huggins had a really strong training camp, and he was really, really good in this game. I think PFF graded him out as the best defensive player on the team. He constantly was around the ball, constantly putting pressure on each of the quarterbacks. And, this is one of those guys who, he could be another one of those bargain bin sort of interior defensive linemen that just absolutely sticks on the roster, like we saw from Timmy Horn last year, Taquan Graham a couple of years ago, even though Taquan Graham was technically a 5th rounder. But, Terry Fontenot has seemed to have a knack of finding those, productive defensive linemen sort of out of nowhere, which is a really, really good trait, really good quality to have. And, the team dominant performance outside of some first half Dolphins drives where they, got to the 5-yard line and then the Falcons turned into the 85 Bears inside the 5-yard line. So we'll take it how we can get it. But the second half was just pure dominance. And it was to the point where they pissed off the Miami Dolphins broadcasters enough to the point where, they were complaining about everything and bringing up the Super Bowl. So I take that as a big win.
Giant dub right there for that. Yeah, they were very unhappy.
The haters were seething and coping.
Yes. It reminds me of like last year with the Jets joint practices where like the Jets writers were just like adamant that the Jets won the practices, but then like everybody else was like, I mean, it was kind of even, honestly. Like it wasn't like that, but it's like we keep telling everyone about the Falcons, like, oh yeah, we think they're going to improve this year. They're probably going to be a playoff team. And then you still see the tweets, like, I can't remember who it was, but it was like, oh, the Falcons' abysmal defensive line is, giving the Dolphins' offensive line fits. So they must be really bad. Clearly you guys haven't paid any attention to anything the Falcons have done because they've totally overhauled the defensive line and it shows. So,
wasn't that like that one of those like NFL Central accounts?
Yeah, it was one of those
run by
bad accounts.
15.
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah.
So,
NFL notifications, XXO, apostrophe. I don't know, whatever you have to do to get the ad, I guess. But it's that was definitely fun to see. But yeah, I mean, you brought up a great point on about the red zone defense, and I think that is something that translates. Like, I think it shows something when you can be so successful in that red area, because that is the area that counts the most. I mean, obviously it would be great if you don't give up, gobs of yards in between the 20s, and, in a regular season game, they'll probably kick some field goals there. Now, honestly, I think the Dolphins were actually right to go for it all those times. Like, I would prefer that teams generally go for it if they get that close. But Joe, I'm curious what you think about that. How excited were you to see the red zone defense look just so good? I mean, they stonewalled him, over and over again in the red zone. What did you think about that performance?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was great to see. And this, I'm not going to take away here from the game, but actually just watching practice today, they were doing some red zone work right in front of us. So you get to see it up close, and they had the starters in, and really daunting to look at, when you've got Calais Campbell, Zach Harrison, Bud Dupree, like these like big guys. You've got quick linebackers in space. And then you have what I think is like brilliant. What Terry Fontenot's done is in several positions, but especially in the secondary, you have such a vast array of different players with different physical traits. So you've got like everybody from a Trey Flowers to a Clark Phillips. And depending on the situation of the game, the players you're going up against, the matchups you might see, you could use, different players in different situations that you think are going to give you an advantage. And so when you have those big bodies, I mean, I was just thinking, man, it must be so hard to be an opposing quarterback to even try to like see your targets out there when you've got, such big guys. So, yeah, I mean, it was great to see them do that. And again, I think that's going to be kind of something of a trademark of this defense. And Arthur Smith always talks about like the crucial downs on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. What is Ritter doing on third downs, on these crucial downs? And I think defensively too, and in the red zone, it's just something that this team really keys in on. And with this, physical, aggressive defense that Ryan Nielsen wants to install, I think that it's going to probably reap the biggest dividends when you get to that portion of the field and you have corners who are used to just being man up against someone in real tight quarters. So it was great to see, but I honestly think that we're going to see it in even better form potentially when you get the starters in there against some of these teams they'll be facing this year.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think it's really important to be good in the red area. It's something that the team has really struggled with in years past. And we know how much of an emphasis that Nielsen is going to place on the red zone defense, but the run defense is a big part of your red zone defense because teams are always going to try to punch it in when they get close. And, that I think the tackling in this game was kind of suspect from the second team and third team, but I think the fits, like I think there were guys had opportunities to shut down pretty much every big run that happened in the backfield. And you're going to miss sometimes, like that's always going to happen. But, it being the first preseason game, guys haven't really gotten to full speed tackle like at all. I mean, even in joint practices, you don't tackle full speed because it's just not, you don't do that until you get to an actual game preseason or otherwise. So I'm not surprised that the tackling was a little sloppy. If it continues throughout the rest of the preseason, maybe that's something we start to hone in on. But I think it's overall, I think the run defense looked fundamentally sound outside of the tackling. And so hopefully that's something that can get cleaned up. But we know how much of an emphasis Ryan Nielsen's going to place on that and by extension, the rest of the red zone. And when you got those guys out there, like you mentioned, I mean, this should be a very imposing front for that run stopping. And they've seemed to emphasize that in all of their offseason acquisitions, whether that's, obviously Calais Campbell, one of the premier run defending defensive linemen in the NFL at this stage of his career. Still a good pass rusher, but he's maybe the best edge rusher, 3-4 defensive end against the run, according to PFF last year or the year before. So he's still elite in that area. And then you've got these guys like Zach Harrison, what can he bring? And he's also got that imposing size. They got Bud Dupree, who's a good run defender, Lorenzo Carter. So they have a lot of guys, and they can rotate a lot of guys too. And they've upgraded the interior.
We saw it in camp. I remember leading off our news and notes articles on the first 2 or 3 days of padded practices and just saying, wow, like the Falcons run defense is absolutely dominating right now. Like we were, of course, Bijan Robinson is the shiny new toy, and we remember just how good the Falcons were in, road grading and rushing offense last year. And, we're expecting them to be very good again this year. But I just remember there was not a single, long run or, even intermediate run that we saw the first 2 or 3 days during padded practice. And that's before Calais Campbell came by. I genuinely think that this Falcons run defense has a ceiling of being a top 3 run defense in the NFL. And I know that sounds, the Falcons have a top 3 anything defense in the NFL sounds like an exaggeration. But I mean, Ryan Nielsen really emphasizes that. And look at his background coming as a defensive line coach from a New Orleans Saints team that was, very good stopping the run for years. And now, if the Falcons can be as good as I think they can be in stopping the run, that just sort of raises the ceiling so far for this team.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And It's something I'm really excited to see because if you're a team that wants to run the football, the other side of the coin is you have to stop the other team from running the football because you don't want them doing what you're trying to do to them right back to you. And that kind of ruins the whole plan. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Falcons to show up, to shore up that part of the defense. And yeah, Joe, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah. I wanted to just touch on what Adnan said and say that, you talk about it being potentially a top 3 run defense. I think that's actually, it's an important point to make, not necessarily to say that they're going to be that, but I think that people overall with this team need to kind of make an adjustment in their heads because the pieces that this team added to a team that was working with like half of its budget last year, like it's a totally different team. And it's a testament to what the coaching staff did with those previous teams to have them, especially last year. Like very few people were saying they would win. If you said more than 5 games, people would kind of look at you sideways. And so to win 7 games, to be in playoff contention for most of the year was so impressive. And now you've just added such quality. I think sometimes I was talking to Will McFadden about this too. It's like, sometimes I feel like people are kind of hesitant to predict such like a large improvement. But I think especially with this Falcons defense in particular, it's just such a vast upgrade so quickly in all areas and on the coaching staff and the players that you brought in. I think they are primed potentially to make that jump that you just described there, Adnan.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I want to get Dave's input on this as well. Dave, what do you think about the red zone defense, the run defense, everything that we've been talking about here?
Top 10 across the board, baby. Let's call it.
Let's do it. We're doing it. We got it, you guys.
Yeah.
All right, you guys heard it here first. You guys can add Dave on Twitter if the Falcons are not a top 10
at the
defense.
Falcoholic. Yeah.
Oh no. All right. Well, thanks for humbling me again. I got out over my skis, but no, it's great to see, and obviously, the run defense with the starters is going to be drastically different than we got with the reserves, and I think that's the thing maybe I'm most excited to see against the Bengals and Joe Mixon is just how does that first team defense look against the run, because the personnel is there in a way that it's not for the reserves. And like even you look at the cornerback depth chart, you look at safety, they're pretty deep there, right? So the secondary, I feel like, was showing just how capable and deep it can be and how fortunate the Falcons are to have the reserves they have there. It's not quite the same in your front seven, especially at inside linebacker where, yeah, they've got some guys there. That's what I'll say about that.
There's some
more
guys. NFL players, yeah.
They got NFL players, but so that run defense to me is going to be one of the more interesting things to watch, because I do agree. I think they have the personnel. They have the mustachioed defensive coordinator who cares about stopping the run. Like, they've got what they need to get that done. So red zone defense too. If we get to the point where it is what Dean Pease dreamed of it being, which is, okay, whatever happens between the 20s, I can be grumpy about it, but it's what's important is you get that stop inside the 20. We had a little bit of that at times, but it was inconsistent. So I think, again, personnel's there, desire's there. I don't think there's any less of a focus on that from Ryan Nielsen. So as long as these guys stay healthy, as long as we see little glimpses of it over the next couple games, I feel great about it going into the season. Again, top 10. Top 10.
You heard it here first. Bold takes here from Dave Choate. And we did get a $5 donation from Corey, who's throwing $5 in here in honor of Joe, just because he likes to cause trouble. So,
there you go. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Nice. Got a listener in.
Absolutely. But no, I mean, you guys raised great points about that. And obviously the progress of the defense from being a bottom tier unit to hopefully being closer to league average, or maybe better if we get lucky. Defense can be more variable than offense, so giant leaps for defense is not unheard of. I'm not willing to go as high as Dave yet, but we'll let Dave sort of Dave, you can be the sole owner of that top 10 take, and you'll be able to
come back and bite me too.
You'll be able to relish in the glory when it comes true, because I'm certain that it will, definitely. But there's a lot of, there's so much to get to from this game. It was interesting. One thing I wanted to touch on is the going down the list. Like, I mean, I think the depth running backs both looked pretty good, although I will say that I think Godwin and Wibwike, who has been with the team only for a couple weeks, I think he was the more impressive of the two running backs. And obviously with his flexibility as a returner, that could give him a leg up in that competition as well. And, Carlos Washington Jr. didn't have the most efficient day, but I thought overall he also looked fine. Didn't look quite as explosive as Ikic, but definitely didn't look out of place out there. Curious if you guys have any takes on how that RB4 battle is shaking out, particularly with the news that Patterson's likely to miss up until the beginning of the season here.
I thought Carlos Washington Jr. had a really good start to training camp, and not to say that he's been bad lately, but I do think it seems like he's maybe plateaued or tailed off just a little bit. It seemed like earlier in camp he was breaking some more kind of big runs on that outside zone, and it seemed like in the game against Miami it was Godwin. I'm just going to stick with Godwin because I will just butcher his last name every time I say it. But it seemed like Godwin was able to more take advantage of some of the opportunities that he had, not just with the carries necessarily, but just with what he was doing with the blocking that was set up in front of him. But what I like about this pairing is it feels like Godwin is kind of more of your lightning to Carlos Washington's thunder. And so it's kind of nice that you, again, to kind of go back to this thing with them, Terry Fontenot in the front office assembling, just various different kinds of player profiles and all these different roles. I think you have a nice kind of combination there between those two players. I would probably expect them to both be on the practice squad to start the season if they don't get claimed by anyone else. And then they can, if Algier goes down with something or they need somebody like that, then you probably go to Carlos Washington Jr. or, otherwise you might go with Godwin. But I think both of them have some potential to just kind of be your Caleb Huntley for this year.
Yeah, and we're sort of still looking to see if they'll keep 4 running backs, because last year, they kept 4, but Avery Williams was the punt returner, so, and like a core special teams player. So, we'll see if Ikic can sort of make his name on special teams. He was playing some special teams like coverage and things like that, so it's possible that if he carves out enough of a role there, he can stick as the 4th running back, particularly if Patterson's going to miss any time to start the season. It seems like he'll probably make it, but that is definitely one of the ones to watch. Anyone else have running back thoughts before we move on to another exciting offensive position group here?
I do think they'll keep that 4th running back. And I think we were reminded of it with the Cordero Patterson news today. As much as we all love Cordero Patterson, he has not been very durable in his time in Atlanta. He's had his, string of really good weeks, but, he sort of always tapers off in the last quarter of the season. Last year, he had the knee scope, which landed him on IR. And, now, I mean, he'll be reevaluated before week 1. Like, that's not a guarantee that he'll be ready on week 1. There's a big difference in wording there. So we don't even know if he'll be prepared for the first week of the season. And even if he is, I don't think that they want to burden Cordero Patterson with a lot of carries. I think they want to keep him fresh. They want to use him as a little bit of a specialist, a little bit in the receiving game. Obviously, we know his prowess as a kick returner, but Patterson is going to be in there as that wide receiver or that running back 3, but it's not going to be your traditional, workhorse RB3. Then you, of course, have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, who will be taking the bulk of the touches, but you still want to have that, that bit of depth behind them in case either of those guys gets hurt. And, we know that the running back position is one of the most at-risk positions in the sport when it comes to those injuries, to those, nagging pains, so to speak. And, I'm with Joe. Carlos Washington, those first few days of camp were incredibly impressive. And, not to say that Carlos Washington isn't, playing well now. I think he played a lot better than the numbers suggested in that game against the Dolphins. Just 27 yards, but he was really going through some contact. A lot of contact that was being met in the backfield. I definitely think Godwin Igwebuike looked a lot better, and I think Godwin Igwebuike is at the moment the favorite, just because because of his prowess in the special teams and because of his experience there. He's gonna be in that kick returner battle. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten more reps in the kick returner battle. But definitely, he I would right now pencil him in as my RB4 to make the 53-man roster.
Yeah. No, I like Ikic a lot. He was definitely flashing early, like, because I think we only saw, I know I only saw like 2 or 3 practices of him before I had to leave Atlanta. I know he's been there, over I guess a couple of weeks now, but yeah, the game certainly helped him, I think, sort of stand out more, because I think the two of them were sort of neck and neck before. So we'll see how that progresses over the rest of preseason. But on the topic of the return battle, D. Alford with that spectacular punt return touchdown. I mean, you have to think that that's going to help Alford's chances of winning that punt return battle, particularly since, there weren't, and nobody else really impressed. Now it's only one preseason game's worth of punt returns, so it's not like you could draw a whole lot of conclusions from that. But curious
and
what
more
you guys
punt return touchdowns than we've seen last season. The regular. When's the last time we had a punt return touchdown?
It's been a long time.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Honestly.
Devin Hester, maybe, I don't know. I think we had
might actually be Hester. Yeah.
Didn't we get one from Brandon Powell that one year? I feel like we either got one from Brandon Powell or that other guy.
This is actually a really sad question I just asked.
Yeah. No, who was that returner that we had that ended up going on? He's been a returner for like the Bills now for like 3 years. I think he's like 34.
You're not thinking of Andre Roberts. No.
Yeah, it's Andre Roberts. Yeah.
It's Andre Roberts, you are? Okay.
Yeah. He's still kicking. He's still out there, man. He was a decent punt returner for us, but
I think for us he was like okay, and then when he went to, I think the Jets, he became Pro Bowl level.
He crushed it. The next year. Yeah. It's like, geez, thanks very much. Yeah. So
it's so hard to tell who's going to actually like make the 53 because of what they might do. For example, they might want to put CP on IR, but they're obviously not going to do that before cuts, because then he'd be out for the year. So you have to roster him. So I was actually just looking back at some of the moves that were made last year. Like, you had Abdullah Anderson was waived, you had Colby Gossett was waived, and there was one other one. Nick Kwiatkowski was waived, but then they were all just signed right back a couple days later because they obviously needed to make room for some guys. So I've been making my 53 too. I kind of have it on my phone going, and I've had to make some edits to it this week based on some of the things that have happened.
Yeah.
But it's basically impossible to do. But you can kind of get a gist. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see Godwin as one of those guys who is potentially waived and then signed right back if there is something longer term with CP, for example. But I think you're probably almost certain to see something like that manifest somewhere on the roster.
Yeah, they're definitely going to play games with it at the end. They're sort of letting go some guys that they're not super concerned about losing on waivers to keep, to potentially swap some guys. Because I believe the preseason IR is the same as in season, where if you go on the IR, you still have to miss 4 games at a minimum. But the clock doesn't start ticking, of course, until week 1. But I know with some players, they want to. I'm not sure. I'm that's one of the IR rules that I'm still not sure about, if you get put on the IR during preseason, if it's season ending or not. But I'll have to clarify that. But
I'm pretty sure it is. If you get put on IR before cuts, you're out for the year.
Yeah. So
I think that's correct.
That's how it's been for a while. But I know with COVID, they sometimes mess with some of the random stuff. But we'll see.
I got to bust in here to remind everyone that the last time there was a punt return touchdown in the regular season, it was Kenyon Barner, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Play Barner.
2019.
2019.
So, all right. It's one of the only things about that season. Yeah. It's one of the only good things that happened. Yes. Yeah, that was a bad one.
Maybe
I think I've entirely forgotten the 2019 season. I literally remembered nothing about that season. And it's probably for the best.
I do just want to say about that punt return touchdown. I sort of got reminded. I reminded myself of the 2016 preseason when we had a big kick returner battle, and there was a guy by the name of J.D. McKissick, who I remember he had this like 101-yard kick return touchdown while Arthur Blank was being interviewed, and I was like, oh my god, like this guy, like, give him a roster spot, like this is incredibly explosive. This is what we've been waiting for. Then they cut him. So I mean, I'm not saying they're gonna cut D. Alford, but it just
Right.
reminded me of like, what the hell were we doing? Like J.D. McKissick went on to have a really good career after that.
Yeah, a very
It's not
good
like we
career.
were flush with talent.
No, it's just like, oh yeah, we don't need him. Whatever, just get him out of here. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about that. It's depressing. We're gonna stay with the positivity on this show, right? We're gonna keep it rolling in that
I'm
direction.
sorry, I can't help but drag us down. It's just in my nature at this
I know
point.
Adnan's such a hater.
We haven't even talked about Desmond Ritter yet, and I'm
I
already.
know. Yeah, he's already
I
hating.
will say, like it was a legitimately good punt return. I
Yes,
hope he
it
wins
was.
it. Like
It
I mean,
was such
it
a
was
good
one,
punt
but like
return.
it was good. It was really
Yeah.
good. And I love D. Alford. He's just such a fan favorite. He's got an amazing story. If anybody doesn't know, he was like working in like a FedEx plant on the overnight shift while he was trying to get a break in the NFL. So
No wonder Arthur Smith discovered him.
You're right.
There you go. Yeah. Great work there, guys. Great work on that one. But yeah, it's I do think D. Alford has a great chance to win that job, certainly. I was surprised that like Matthew Sexton was getting some like early work there, and like he was actually getting some early work in the game, period. Like he's like literally just got here. So it seems like they actually like him a fair amount, so that's interesting. But yeah, you have to think like D. Alford has a huge advantage now because like that was, and he's already gonna make the roster, so it sort of means like I think that's sort of like, okay, well, I think it's like they kind of probably wanted like him to win it, honestly, because it's like, okay, well, we don't need to keep anybody else special for this. So
I honestly think the biggest thing for him is like, can he just prove to the coach's trust that he's just going to consistently catch the ball? Like, like as a defensive back, you typically go with the receiver just because they're more sure-handed. That's what you're doing most of the time as a returner. So, yeah, I think that could be something that comes
The
down
Eric
to.
Weems special right there. Eric Weems part 2.
Yeah. Jeez. All right.
Don't be smart, Eric Williams, on this program. We don't allow that here.
Yeah.
Getting some good callback names tonight.
He does.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're getting
I
there's
know.
some deep cuts. That's preseason content.
Eric Weems 1.0 was a Pro Bowler in 2010.
That's true.
Eric Weems 2.0 is the human fair catch.
Yeah. It could be worse, but
he was also part of my favorite play of all time, which was Michael Turner using him as a human shield and just throwing him forward for a block. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, I will never forget
that's an amazing
that
gif.
kick return. I'll never forget that kick return against the Bucks in 2010. They're like cream orange jerseys. It's like, oh my God, there's no way we're gonna lose to the 1 in like 10 Bucks and Josh Freeman. Another deep cut name right there.
Josh
there
Freeman.
you go, man.
Wow.
We're diving way too deep here. We got to come back up for air at this point. But all right. Well, I mentioned.
I was gonna say, if we want to talk about receivers, we could bring Amsterdam back up, Brandon Harvey. Like we got all these ones.
Bernard Brady.
Because we're professionals, we're gonna take that, Dave, and we're gonna segue into the wide receiver 5 battle.
Exactly. We're gonna talk about the most important battle on the roster, the wide receiver 5. Yeah. We mentioned a couple names already, right? Matthew Sexton seemed to be getting some work there. Penny Hart, Josh Ali, maybe Xavier Malone, still a dark horse. I think he was like the highest rated offensive player for the Falcons in the game, actually. My boy Zay
50
Malone.
receiving yards.
Yeah. 2 catches, 50 yards. So, I mean, Zay Malone, obviously my son, big fan of Zay Malone. But, yeah, I mean, Josh Ali unfortunately had that like drop in the end zone. Which again, maybe not his fault. It's kind of a pass breakup.
He had that one, but he had that like straight drop on the deep pass.
That's true.
Too.
That's true.
That one could have gone for a touchdown. Like that's one of those where it's like, oh my God, he could create some real separation for this battle, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh,
yeah.
Yikes.
Well, and it looked like Frank Darby was going to be a factor here too, and unfortunately he ends up on IR as well. So I'm curious where you guys think this battle stands. So we'll go around the horn real quick and get everyone's takes, just because the wide receiver battle is always fun. Everybody likes to watch the wide receivers. So Joe, where are you leaning in the wide receiver? Because I know you've got a roster. So who are you leaning for that 5th spot at this stage?
I mean, I wish we could like make our judgments on this based on like wide receiver things that we expect wide receivers to do in games, but like that doesn't really matter so much for this roster spot. I thought it was really, TJ Yates was really funny when he was asked about it in Miami, and he was like, ask Marquise. It's like, I think it was Torrey McElhinney from the Falcons, like, what's it going to take for the 5th receiver to who gets the 5th receiver spot. And he said, ask Marquise Williams, who is the special teams coach. And I actually asked him that the other day, and he kind of gave me just a boilerplate answer. But to get back to the question, if I had to put money on it right now, I would say it is your son, Zay Malone, Kevin. Who was not the one I was on to begin camp, which I thought was great at the beginning of training camp. Everybody just randomly picked somebody, or maybe not so randomly, but everybody picked their preferred receiver that was going to make it. Mine was Slade Bolden. I still think Slade is at a decent camp. I think he could make the practice squad, but I think Zay is more likely just because I see him as kind of he's in the kick return rotation when they do special teams. Like he's one of the guys returning kicks, so he can do that for you. He can obviously return punts and do those sorts of things. So that's who I would go with right now. And but he has been making some. There has not been, the ball's not been thrown deep too much in training camp, but it seems like when there is a deep reception, it typically almost like half chance that it's Zay Malone they're throwing to deep.
Yeah.
So.
Because he gets open. I mean, I think he's better after the catch than people think, even though he's a smaller guy. That was something that was all over his very, 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 very fun college tape. But Division II Henderson State shout out, by the way. This is some hilarious tape. But yeah, I mean, I would love for it to be Zay Malone. And I wonder, like, if they lean that way because they're sort of looking for more team speed, which they don't necessarily have elsewhere. Like, obviously they have Scotty Miller, but other than Scotty Miller and Kyle Pitts as their deep threats, they don't really have anyone else to fill that role. So I do wonder if they lean more that direction rather than keeping a bigger guy. But yeah, I love Zay Malone, so I certainly won't argue with that one. Dave, where are you leaning? Because obviously we lost Frank Darby, who I think was going to be a lot of people's favorite based on how he was performing in camp and that sort of thing. But Dave, where you lean at this point?
Yeah, I'd say to me it's either Malone or Penny Hart, and I think it's really just a question of what they want. To your point, like, are you going with the higher upside deep threat, who is Malone, or are you going with maybe the more proven special teamer, which would be Hart? And to me, I'd like to see them. You can keep the other guy on the practice squad, right? And probably they'll stay there. If you probably will get away with that. I'd like to see Malone get it. I'd like to have somebody who's a little more high upside as a receiver actually on the roster. So I'm leaning toward him after seeing what he's done to this point. I do think, it's going to depend. If you're asking Marquise Williams, it may very well be Penny Hart, because we know what Penny Hart can do. Penny Hart has been in this league for several years and is a reliable player. So I think it is down to those two. And thankfully he's just injured, but RIP Frank Darby. The last 2 years I was sure he was going to have a bigger role and make the team in a way that he didn't. And he finally got his chance, and here we are. So
yeah,
it's a bummer.
Absolutely tragic. So best wishes to Frank Darby, who once again I'm not going to be able to see this year, unfortunately.
I actually did see him today at practice, so he is still around. He was just doing some rehab. They've got that other field where they have some of the injured players just working. So it was good to see him. I'm glad he's still around. He was laughing, smiling, normal Frank Darby, which is great.
Yeah, I think they can actually play again as long as they get waived with an injury settlement. I think a certain amount of time has to pass before the team that settles with them can re-sign them. But I think we've seen that before, where you have to waive them with an injury settlement so they go back on the open market. You can't just hold them on injured reserve. But I think that's one way you can get guys off of IR, but you have to risk them to the rest of the league to do that. You can't just use that to sort of get around the rule. But
they're not doing that with Matt Hennessy. They're not risking that with Matt Hennessy.
No, exactly. They're not going to do that with Hennessy. No, it would be more of guys that they thought maybe they could get, because like Chris Blair, for instance, like he got put on IR but then waived with an injury settlement, so he's eligible to sign elsewhere if he can pass a physical at this point. So so that's one thing to keep in mind, but we have no idea. Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
I was just gonna say one thing I want to throw in, because I just saw in the chat like somebody else named as the fourth receiver. It's going to be Hodge, right? Like, to me, there's no question in my mind that Kadarius Hodge is making this roster. So I wouldn't dream big about anybody else taking like the fourth slot. It's going to be Hodge.
No, I don't even think he played in the preseason game, which tells you everything you need to know. So
he's wide receiver 3.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's Scotty Miller is actually wide receiver 4. So Miller looks good though too.
Now that's a debate. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Adnan, you going with the Georgia State legend? I assume you are.
I mean, as a two-time graduate of, the great Georgia State University, go Panthers, of course I'm going to go with Penny Hart. That's my guy. But yeah, no, it really does come down to special teams. And objectively speaking, genuinely, even though I am pushing a very clear and firm Penny Hart agenda since the start of training camp, very shamelessly pushing that. Objectively, I do think he has a really good chance of making this roster just because he is a very proven special teams player. He's, he can give you a lot of work as a gunner. He's been a part of that punt return competition. He's someone where, and this punt return competition is something where it's not just going to be all right, if D. Alford wins, then he's the only guy that is ever allowed to return a punt ever. Because if something happens to D. Alford, you want to have some of those other guys as emergency backups. And I know they've been playing Bijan Robinson in that emergency role a little bit. I don't think that they want to put Bijan Robinson back there to return any kicks legitimately like this season. But I mean, Penny Hart, he didn't really show much as a wide receiver. He had that 9-yard catch on a really good route, by the way. Like, I remember that route where I think it was a little like curl route, and then like he saw that he was covered and he just moved to the right instinctively a little bit, and he just gave Logan Woodside an opening, which was a really savvy and really instinctive play, which was really nice to see. But yeah, I genuinely think that this was starting to become Frank Darby's like role to lose, which is what really sucks about the injury. And I really feel bad for Frank Darby because this was his best training camp by far of these 3 years. Like, when the pads came on, Frank Darby just took it to a new level. And I even asked Arthur Smith about it in the last press conference where I was at Flowery Branch on that last Saturday. And he's like, yeah, no, Frank's been stacking days. Like, Frank Darby has been, very, very good. Obviously, like, the attitude, the vibes are always there with Frank Darby. But, like, the football, like, credentials, the football prowess was catching up to those vibes, at this, but like before it was just the, the vibes and stuff, but now he was like actually showing it on the field, and he was the wide receiver 5 on the original depth chart. Josh Ali, by the way, the wide receiver 6 on that original depth chart. So I do think it's important to mention that the coaches have been impressed with what he's done. He's definitely not going anywhere, but this competition is really fun. Like, this is always one of the most fun competitions every year in preseason. And this year especially, I have no idea how it's going to play out. Like, I think sitting here right now on August 16th, I would guess that I would assume it'll be Penny Hart, but I have no idea. Every single day in training camp, it seems like a new guy was stepping up and a new guy was having just an incredible day. And it's just like nobody has been able to separate themselves. And I think Josh Ali had the opportunity to start separating himself if he didn't have that drop, because that genuinely could have been a touchdown catch. But it's going to be fun, and we're not even close to deciding it. Like, we still have another 2 preseason games. I think this may come down to the fourth quarter of that last preseason game. Like, this is genuinely a very, very fun competition, and I hate it for Frank Darby because I think that this was the year for him to really sort of start putting it all together. And it just sucks that an injury sort of robs him of that, because even if this injury isn't very hugely long term, I think it was a hamstring, it's still an injury that you can't afford to have when you're in this tight of a competition. You cannot afford to miss 2 or 3 weeks right now if you're one of like 7 guys who's vying for this, wide receiver 5 position, which is, maybe the 50th man on the roster at this point.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's tough call there for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's other guys in the mix too. Like, I mean, Josh Ali, obviously, I think is there. I think he was the favorite maybe going into camp, but hasn't necessarily impressed as much as those other guys that we mentioned. And then I think JJ Arcega-Whiteside is right sort of in the mix too. But again, he seems like more of a practice squad guy just because they seem like they already have like, we've got like 4 of this guy. Like we've got, we've got London and we've got Mac Hollins and we got Kaderil Hodge, who are all these bigger receivers. So I think they sort of maybe are looking for something a little bit different for those other 2 spots, like not necessarily trying to just get like 5 of the same guy out there.
And they'll have like 6 tight ends anyway.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, maybe we have enough size. Like I know that's hard to say, obviously, for Arthur Smith. Maybe you can never have enough, but in this case, maybe. But we did get a good question here from Mad Tom K, which is a good way to sort of close out here. Mad says, with the $5, by the way, thanks so much, Mad. Which rookie, including UDFAs, impressed you the most against Miami? So overall, who was the most impressive? Joe, as the guest of honor, I'll let you get the first crack.
Oh gosh, the rookie UDFAs. Is Godwin? I mean, is Godwin? Is he a UDFA? I don't even know if he's.
They don't have to be a UDFA. It could be any rookie or a UDFA. So it could be
Godwin,
the draft picks.
Godwin played for the Lions. Was it last year that he played for the Lions, or was it? No, last year was the Seahawks 2 years ago.
I'll allow it, though, if you want to go with Godwin. Yeah. He's like a new player to the team.
Yeah, I'd say, I would go with him. I mean, no particular reason over other guys. I just, he obviously stood out. I do want to talk about the third quarterback, but we can get back to that.
Okay.
I think Woodside's like a lock to make this roster. By the way, I think they're going to go with him, use him on the 53. He's too important to give away. I think Arthur Smith has invested too much into him. I think he likes him too much. Sorry,
Toledo
that's getting
legend.
away from the question.
No, Toledo legend. Yeah, well, we can close out with that. Yeah, that Maction. Yeah, he's been watching too much Maction late in the week.
That's right. So. Yeah, he loves the Maction. Yeah.
Dave, who was the most impressive rookie or UDFA? Or we'll say new player to the team in the preseason game for you.
To me, it was DeMarco Helms. And I think, shades of, he's not the same player, but Kamal Ishmael to me was like a guy that I always loved, came in as a 7th rounder, was a physical safety, did a lot of great things on special teams, started some games, obviously, maybe too many games for them for one reason or another, but, a glue guy you could count on to get the job done. And I see a lot of that with Helms. He really impressed me. He looked extremely solid as a tackler, just did a really nice job, knows what he's doing, physical player. And obviously he has special teams value. He's able to make some instinctive big plays. I thought that interception was a nice play, obviously aided by Trey Flowers. But to me, he was the guy that, coming in, I was like, okay, a special teamer with some upside maybe. And basically throughout camp and now into preseason, I've been really impressed with him. And I think he's done a lot to make this roster. And he was the guy that probably out of everybody that's new stood out to me the most.
Yeah, no, that's a good one too. And he gives me like shades of Kamal Ishmael, UCF legend Kamal Ishmael. So similar, like very physical safety, a lot of special teams value. Kamal Ishmael actually ended up, I think, converting to linebacker when he left Atlanta, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
but I do think Helms is more like cover, like he's able to cover more than Ishmael was, but certainly more of that box type safety. Adnan, who you got as the top rookie and or UDFA?
I'm gonna go with the UDFA, and I just want to give him a shout out as a name we haven't mentioned yet. Natrone Brooks. Natrone Brooks has impressed me throughout training camp. He had that sack toward the end of the game there, but just in general, he's really sort of stood out to me on some plays. Like I remember specifically on that last Saturday, it was that last drill, the 2-minute drill, where the first team went out there, second team went out there, and then Logan Woodside was leading the third teamers out there against the third team defense. And this was a day when the secondary was absolutely stifling. Like the quarterbacks just could not really get anything going. And I remember there was a sequence. There were 5 different passes thrown in a row from Logan Woodside. I think this was 11 on 11s. And 4 of them were incomplete. All 4 of them, which were incomplete, were all passes where Natrone Brooks was the primary man in coverage. And 2 of them, I think he had a couple of pass deflections. 2 of them were deep passes, where he was, step by step with the wide receiver. I don't know. I'm not going to guarantee that Natrone Brooks is going to make this roster. I do think it's a vicious battle, toward the end of that cornerback depth chart at this point. Like, I don't think it's a guarantee that Cornell Armstrong is going to make it. I don't even think it's a guarantee that Darren Hall is going to make it.
Right.
Just because of some of these guys who are really standing out, like Natrone Brooks, Breon Borders was mentioned earlier today. Like, these guys in the secondary are out here making plays. It just feels contagious from that starting secondary, and it just, like, they're out there dominating the first teamers, and then it sort of feels contagious to everywhere else around the depth chart. I do think Natrone Brooks, if he doesn't make it, I think he's definitely a candidate for the practice squad.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a guy that can play both safety and corner. So you think that versatility certainly helps him in that regard. We saw Lucas Dennis also make a play. We didn't really call his name much at training camp because he was over working with the third, fourth string group, but XFL star Lucas Dennis. So maybe he's someone we should pay more attention to as well. Yeah. And with me, I mean, I'll go with my boy, of course, Zay Malone. Had the most receiving yards of anyone, had those 2 great catches. And I think, we'll see how much noise he can make. Can he make enough to basically force the team to put him on the roster? I still think he's probably ticketed for the squad, as, even though I've been like leading the charge, I sort of feel like they're going to go with more of a special teams focused guy like a Penny Hart at this stage. But I think Zay Malone has the most upside of this group for sure. So it wouldn't shock me if they're like, we can't really risk this guy on the waiver wire. We need to keep another deep threat around in our back pocket. And I think in time, he's a guy that you can trust to do those special teams things as well. But that 5th receiver is probably not going to be active on game day anyway. So it's like, maybe It doesn't really matter how much special teams you play. You have to be able to check the box if you're active, but you're not going to be a core special teams contributor at that point. So,
Kevin, if we really want to utilize deep threats, we need a quarterback that's going to throw the ball. I'm kidding. I had to get it out there.
Okay, yeah, but we didn't talk about Ritter at all because he didn't play. So I know Adnan had to get his dig in before the show ended. So, okay. Well, on the quarterback topic, though, I know, Joe, you had some thoughts on the third quarterback. And I think it's a really interesting conversation because of that new rule, too. So
yeah. I don't think it happens without the new rule that Logan Woodside would be on the roster. But I think when you look at, Arthur Smith, he wants his quarterback to be mobile, and potentially take hits. Ritter's not the biggest guy. Heineke, obviously, we've seen him kind of get banged up before. So not to say that these guys are injury prone, but just to say that, that third quarterback, it's a nice kind of safety blanket to have. And I think that, Adnan, you saw it up close and personal, Logan Woodside, really taking command of the team. And I thought that you saw him really operate really well in this game against the Dolphins. And I think Arthur Smith is probably hiding a lot of the praise for him. I don't think he wants to kind of go over the top, like praising Woodside too much, but I think that he is really impressed, and he certainly keeps players accountable, which is what you want any quarterback to do. And I think sometimes you have these third quarterbacks who don't feel that kind of confidence to be able to do that, or they're rookies, or they're inexperienced guys. I just think that Woodside fits a lot of boxes that Arthur Smith likes.
Yeah. I mean, remember the moment with Penny Hart, where Penny Hart was celebrating, and then like Woodside literally threw his helmet on the ground. He was absolutely furious at him. I think that was the most emotional I've seen anyone at camp. And I don't say emotional in a bad way. It's something that you want to see out of any of your quarterbacks, out of any of your signal callers. Like, yeah. And I mean, Woodside didn't throw Penny Hart under the bus in the interview afterwards.
Yep.
He just
went
he's
out
there
and like,
we didn't execute.
We didn't execute correctly, and that's all it was. And I mean, I think it's the perfect reaction you wanted to see out of your quarterback.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a good. It wouldn't surprise me either because of the new rule, and it's at this point, it's like I don't know how seriously they take that new rule, but given how much trust they clearly place in Woodside, and the fact that they didn't even bother to have a fourth quarterback around. A lot of teams keep a fourth quarterback for camp. The Falcons just didn't even bother really outside of a couple.
We have Felipe Franks on the team.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
We
had like Austin on.
Open.
Yeah.
It's the Felipe Franks memorial spot at this point.
Yes,
so.
we have to hold that open forever. Yep, the fourth spot is forever.
Yeah. Arthur Smith is going to go out there and say, we're only going to run 52 men on this roster. The 53rd man is in honor of Felipe Franks.
Yes, pour one out for Felipe. Yeah, pour one out for Felipe. But no, I think that is an interesting question, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if you're right about that they do end up going with that third quarterback just because of the rule and because, like, you'd think he would be claimed just sitting out there, given what he's shown already, and sort of the, teams need. I mean, I think he could be a quarterback 2 somewhere, and I think he was the quarterback 2 at times for the Titans, behind Tannehill. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes, and if they do end up keeping him. But I think he's certainly worthy of that.
If you do that, of course, you're just, you got to take a risk. So I have them actually like not keeping Godwin or Carlos Washington. That's kind of like that's where you kind of take away from that, and then hopefully you can keep them on the practice squad or elevate them at some point in the season when you need them.
Yeah, they could go that route, or maybe like 8 offensive linemen instead of 9. Some teams do that. But yeah, or you just don't keep a fullback and you make Parker Hesse the full-time fullback. So he could do everything. He's integral. We know. So the offense can't work without him.
So I was thinking about this today.
Yeah.
With the additions to this offense, is Keith Smith and Parker Hesse a redundancy? I mean, in some respects it probably is, but Keith Smith is a really important special teams player. Obviously, both these players were super important for the team last year. It's just something I'm thinking about because you have all these guys who you want to keep. So I don't know.
Yeah, they do line the tight end.
Marquise
go
Williams,
ahead. Yeah, please.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like Marquise Williams has I don't want to say unusually prominent voice, but definitely a prominent voice with these guys. So to me, if Keith Smith is a really valuable special teamer, but not as good a blocker as Parker Hesse, which I don't think anybody's going to argue with, they'll probably still keep Keith Smith just because he's so integral for Williams, and that seems to be an important factor. But I think, in a world where every roster spot should be a bit of a dogfight, like I see where you're going with it. I like the thought. I think they could easily get away without keeping a fullback. I just think that, again, because of Smith's value as a special teamer, he probably sticks.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, that's sort of the crux of it, is that if Smith was just like a fullback, that would be one thing, but he's such a key special teamer that, you sort of think that as long as he can play, they'll keep a spot warm for him, as long as he continues playing at that level. Yeah, guys, great job. I think we covered all the main points from that preseason game. There were a couple other notes that I just wanted to touch on briefly. Obviously, we say goodbye to Michael Walker, who was waived after the game. That didn't really shock me considering what happened in the game, where I think Michael Walker was the lowest graded defensive player. And when you're like second string,
a little lower. So
yeah,
there was no need for me to even mention that. I could have.
Wow, just Kamoko Toure catching strays.
There we go. He's on a roll.
Hey. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, so it seems like the writing was on the wall there. And that was an interesting one because I think we talked about it all offseason. It's like, okay, like I felt like one of the three, like Jalen Hawkins, Michael Walker, or Matt Hennessy was going to get cut because of the savings and like, but I didn't know which one. And then very quickly it seemed to be like, okay, Michael Walker's probably gonna be the one. So they do actually save some money from that move too, which is probably why they were eager to do it. And we'll see if anybody else that, they brought in Frank Ginda, a USFL legend. But honestly, I think this is probably something that they're just going to watch final cuts and bring in a vet. We'll see which one it is, but I think that's likely to happen alongside Nate Landman, seeming to be the third linebacker. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, we saw Ade Ogundeji placed on IR. We already talked about Frank Darby on IR. And then Matt Hennessy also placed on IR. So these are guys that we're going to be without. So a lot of injuries this week. There haven't been a bunch of corresponding moves yet, particularly for the Hennessy one. So we'll see what happens there. Do they go and go out and try to get a veteran, swing guard, or do they go after that swing tackle that everyone's been clamoring for and elevate some other guys? Not really sure, but that's sort of the housekeeping related stuff that we've had to deal with this week. Unfortunately, getting some more injuries in here. So we'll see what the team ends up doing with some of these new roster spots.
Sad to see Michael Walker go. I'll just say, as someone who covers the team, great guy in the locker room, super nice, always like willing to talk. And, as a journalist, you just appreciate guys like that. So it's a shame, but I'm glad he got picked up in Chicago, and wish nothing but the best for him. Troy Anderson today was talking about just like how much he loves the guy. So I think it was sad for some of these linebackers to see him go.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who, went to a few training camp sessions. They said that, Michael Walker was the nicest guy. Like, he came up there, long conversation with them, and just, was giving the fans the time of day every single day as well.
Yeah, he did seem like a genuinely good guy, and that's the thing. Like all these guys, like Frank Darby, loved by pretty much everyone. Really fun personality. Michael Walker, loved by everyone. Owen Deji, I think very, very friendly, very popular as well. So you always hate to see it with these guys. The only thing is, like, if they're on IR, they're probably sticking around for at least another season. It seems likely that they'll probably be brought back, next year, futures contract type stuff. It does give them a chance to stick with the team when maybe some of them we would have had to cut. Maybe they do end up on the practice squad or whatever, but they can the team can keep them close at least. So, so there's maybe a silver lining there for some of these guys that they'll get maybe another shot next year. But never want to see injuries, obviously. Guys, really appreciate everyone for hanging out with us, almost 100 of you on deep within the preseason here. I know everyone's getting geared up for the regular season. That's just 3 weeks away now, 4 weeks away. So we're almost there. I think it's less than 4 weeks. So
September 10th, I think.
Yeah. So we're getting close. So guys, thank you so much. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Really appreciate those metrics. Leave a comment if you're so inclined. If you're listening to the podcast audio, leave us that 5-star review on your platform of choice. Really appreciate that. If you are a patron or are wanting to become a patron, make sure if you're that you fill out the form to join the fantasy leagues. We're trying to start those soon, within the next couple days. So if you haven't filled out the form yet, or let me know that you're planning to play, please do that immediately. If you're trying to sign up to join the fantasy leagues, you need to do that tonight or tomorrow or Friday if you want to do that. Patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. If you want to do that, absolutely fine. Just a couple more days is the time you have left. So we'll get the drafts for those going probably on Monday. So excited for that. I think we're going to have 3 leagues this year because we got so many people clamoring to get in. So fun stuff there. We will be back for a post-game show after Friday's preseason game. We're going to be, pausing the play-by-play for the time being. So we're not going to get into that tonight. But, when we have an update, we'll give you guys an update. So we will at least be doing a post-game show, however. So look for that. I'll be on with Jordan Watkins after this game. I know. So we will be, excited to break that down. Hopefully another big dub. But before we sign off, I want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. First of all, our guest of honor, Joe Patrick at JPatrick200, 929 The Game's Atlanta Falcons reporter, as well as the editor over at Dirty South Soccer. Joe, anything else you'd like to plug before we sign off?
No, just, if you're in the Atlanta area, 929 The Game, you might catch me on there. I wish I could kind of promote something for me with the station specifically, but they just kind of call me randomly and be like, hey, can you jump on, here in an hour? So you might catch me. I'm on every Thursday at 1:20 with Andy and Randy. How about that? Yeah,
there you go. Good plug.
Well,
company man.
We're going to write the station to give Joe his own show.
There you go. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, you can use this. I'll
be on.
Show how knowledgeable.
When the regular season starts, I'll be on the Wade. It's called the Wade Ford Tailgate Show, which is the pregame to the pregame show. So you can catch me there.
Nice. Definitely check that out, guys. We also have with us, of course, the boss man, Dave Choate at Falcoholic himself. Dave, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
No, just the preseason coverage and the roster cutdowns. Obviously, I think the team, and by which I mean our team, does a great job every year with the coverage, and it's nice to get back in the swing of it. So hopefully you're enjoying what we're doing, and keep tuning in and reading.
Absolutely. Good plug there, Dave. Adnan Ikic is my co-host. He's at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything you'd like to plug?
I just wrote my annual. This is the second year I'm doing it. Article about Atlanta's franchise cornerstones going into the new season. So that just went up today. So check that one out.
Yeah. Well, guys, really appreciate everyone. Appreciate Adnan, Dave, and of course our special guest, Joe Patrick. Guys, we will be back, like I said, Friday night after the game. nice and late for that post-game coverage. And, of course, we will be continuing to provide you guys that sweet, sweet content all the way through the preseason and, of course, into the regular season. So we will see you then. Tonight's show was brought to you by BetOnline. We will see you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Folks, thank you so much. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, the site is thefalcoholic.com for all that sweet, sweet written content. We will see you next time